Something moved, not on the surface, not where you could see it or feel it coming, 30 kilometers beneath the seafloor, in the dark, under pressure that would crush a submarine. Two tectonic plates that had been locked together for decades finally let go. The shaking lasted nearly a minute. In coastal towns across northern Japan, people ran for high ground. Tsunami sirens screamed. And then something strange happened. The waves that came were almost nothing, 80 centimeters, less than 3 feet. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. Because the seismologists watching the data weren't relieved. They were alarmed. And within hours, Japan issued only the third such warning in its entire modern history, alerting tens of millions of people that the worst might still be coming. Let's go back to April 20th, 2026. A magnitude 7.7 earthquake struck off the coast of the Sanriku region, the same stretch of northeastern Japan coastline that has been battered by some of history's most destructive tsunamis. Now, a 7.7 is not a small earthquake. The energy released is equivalent to roughly 32 nuclear bombs detonating simultaneously underground. Buildings shake, infrastructure strains, people panic. But here's what made this one unusual from the very first data packet seismologists received. The hypocenter, the actual origin point of the rupture, was 30 kilometers deep. That depth matters enormously. When an earthquake ruptures shallowly close to the seafloor surface, it physically heaves the ocean floor upward. That vertical displacement pushes a column of water up, and that energy radiates outward as a tsunami. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake, which killed nearly 20,000 people and triggered the Fukushima nuclear disaster, was a shallow rupture. The seafloor lurched upward by meters. The resulting tsunami was over 40 meters tall in some locations. The April 20th earthquake was different. It was deep. The shaking on land was powerful, but the vertical displacement of the seafloor was comparatively small, which is exactly why the tsunami warnings predicted waves up to 3 meters, and the ocean delivered just 80 centimeters, and that, counterintuitively, is what worried scientists most. Here's the part that doesn't make headlines, but probably should. When a fault ruptures deeply, it doesn't just release stress, it redistributes it. Think of it like squeezing one end of a toothpaste tube. The pressure has to go somewhere. In this case, seismologists are concerned that the stress released 30 kilometers down may have been transferred upward to shallower segments of the same fault system. And those shallower segments, they're the ones responsible for generating the kinds of tsunamis that don't just rattle coastlines, they erase them. In 1896, a magnitude 8.5 earthquake struck almost this exact region. It's called a tsunami earthquake, a term for a specific nightmarish class of event where the shaking itself is deceptively mild, but the ocean reacts with catastrophic fury. The 1896 tsunami killed over 22,000 people. Many of them didn't run because the shaking didn't feel dangerous. They had no idea what was coming. That event, and others like it, originate from shallow ruptures on the subduction interface. The M7.7 on April 20th may have just loaded that same trigger. Within hours of the earthquake, Japan's meteorological agency issued what they call a Megaquake Subsequent Quake Advisory. This is not a drill. This is not panic. And critically, this is not a prediction. It's something more unsettling, a statement of statistical reality. Under normal circumstances, on any given week, the probability of a magnitude 8 or larger earthquake occurring in this region is approximately 0.1%. That's the baseline, the background hum of geological risk that Japan lives with every single day. After April 20th, that number jumped to 1%, a tenfold increase. For 7 days, 182 municipalities across northeastern Japan, home to tens of millions of people, are inside an elevated risk window. That includes hospitals, schools, nuclear infrastructure, including the Fukushima Daiichi site, which as of this recording, remains stable. But here's the critical nuance that separates science from fear-mongering. 1% is not 100%. A tenfold increase in a small number is still a small number. The advisory exists not to cause panic, but to ensure that local governments pre-position emergency resources, that coastal residents review their evacuation routes, and that critical facilities run elevated safety protocols. This is precisely what science-informed governance looks looks like. But there's a question hanging over every seismologist monitoring this situation, one that modern science cannot answer. Was the April 20th earthquake the main event or the opening act? In seismology, we have names for both possibilities. A foreshock is an earthquake that precedes a larger event on the same fault. A main shock is the largest event in a sequence. The problem is, you cannot tell them apart in real time. The math is brutal. 80 to 85% of large subduction zone earthquakes occur with no detectable precursors whatsoever. No warning swarm, no unusual ground movement, no chemical signals, nothing. And the remaining 15 to 20%, the foreshocks that do precede larger events, they look identical to regular earthquakes until the bigger one arrives. Seismologists can only identify a foreshock retroactively by looking backward from the larger event and recognizing the pattern. In the forward direction, in real time, with lives at stake, they're blind. That's not a failure of science. That's the honest frontier of what we know. And it's why the next 72 hours of aftershock monitoring and GPS data are so critical. Scientists are measuring something called afterslip, the slow, continued movement of plates after a major rupture. If the fault system is stabilizing, aftershocks will decrease in frequency and magnitude in a predictable pattern. The stress has found equilibrium. If the system is cascading, if aftershocks are migrating, or if GPS stations are recording accelerating ground movement, that changes the picture entirely. Right now, teams of seismologists across Japan are watching those screens around the clock. To understand why this advisory carries so much weight, you need to understand the geology of where this happened. The Sanriku coast sits directly above the Japan Trench, a 9,000 meter deep scar in the Pacific Ocean floor where the Pacific Plate grinds beneath the North American Plate at roughly 8 centimeters per year, one of the most seismically active subduction zones on Earth. This is the same system that produced the 1896 Meiji Sanriku tsunami, which killed 22,000 people. The 1933 Showa Sanriku earthquake, which killed 3,000. And the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, nearly 20,000 dead, $360 billion in damage, and a nuclear crisis that is still being managed today. This coastline has a memory measured not in years, but in centuries of catastrophe. And the plates haven't stopped moving. They never stop. Every year, more strain accumulates. Every decade that passes without a major release is another decade of stored energy. The April 20th earthquake released some of that energy. Whether it released enough or whether it shifted that energy somewhere more dangerous is the question that keeps seismologists awake right now. The JMA advisory runs until April 27th, 2026, 7 days. During that window, here's what the scientific community is watching. Aftershock patterns. Are they decaying normally or migrating along the fault towards shallower segments? GPS ground deformation data. Are coastal stations stabilizing or recording continued slow slip? Ocean buoy readings from the DART Tsunami Monitoring Network and the Fukushima Daiichi site specifically, operating under elevated protocols for the duration. If the next 7 days pass without escalation, the advisory expires. The risk window closes. Life returns to the baseline, which in Japan still means living on one of the most geologically active pieces of real estate on the planet. But if something larger happens, if the M7.7 turns out to have been, in the language of seismology, a foreshock, then the world will watch Japan face something that no amount of preparation can fully absorb. And the seismologists who issued this advisory will have been right to sound the alarm. Here's what I want you to take away from this. This story is not about fear. It's about the honest, uncomfortable frontier of what human science can and cannot do. We have built extraordinary tools, seismograph networks that can detect a rupture anywhere on Earth within minutes, GPS systems sensitive enough to measure millimeters of ground movement, ocean buoy arrays that give coastal communities precious extra minutes of warning. And still, we cannot predict earthquakes. We can measure risk. We can monitor systems. We can issue statistically honest advisories. But the Earth does not negotiate. It doesn't send previews. What we can do, what Japan has done better than almost any nation on Earth, is prepare. Elevated seawalls, evacuation drills practiced by school children, emergency protocols so deeply embedded in culture that they activate automatically. That preparation, built over decades of tragedy, is the reason the 1% window is being taken seriously right now. Not with panic, but with precision. The advisory expires April 27th. We'll be watching. If this video helped you understand what's actually happening in Japan right now, beyond the headlines, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this kind of science communication reach more people. Drop in the comments, did this change how you think about earthquake risk? I read every single one. Subscribe if you're new. We cover the science behind the world's biggest mysteries, disasters, and discoveries every week. Stay curious, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next one.